Welcome to episode 36 of the Trash Talk Business Podcast. If you are in the junk removal world, you're hauling stuff, you're picking it up, you're putting it down, you're doing deconstruction. Hell, I don't even care if you're picking up trash bags on the side of the road. You came to the right place. If you want to learn how to grow, scale, get into, or get out of this wonderful junk removal dream that we're living every day. As always, I'm joined by my co-host from the great state of Texas, Casey. What are we talking about today?
I have no fucking clue, but I know we have a guest, and his name is Brett, so we're going to learn more about that.
There we go. That's how much show prep Casey has done. I guess I'll take the reins from here. I met Brett a couple months ago back in Louisville. He was a speaker at the Scrap Expo. He has a podcast, A Scrap Life, and two things got me excited. A, he's third-generation scrap business owner, hauler, open the gate, close the gate kind of guy. That got me excited. And two, he's done a podcast, which means he's all about educating those around us how we can be better stewards to our community, to the world, and recycle more. Brett, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, fellas. And even though Casey doesn't know me, I'm okay with that.
That's fine. You know what?
Not yet, right?
Not yet. That's the key.
No,
Not yet.
Trust me. I'm 100% okay with that. You know,
and that's why we do this. All right, so let's
Brett,
just
you'll
jump
be
into
surprised to know, Brett, like, I'll get an email on the guest, and I'll be like, all right, cool. That's it. There's no preface. There's no context. It's just like, we have a guest. And I'm like, okay.
yeah. I think, you know, the good thing is, man, is like that's my favorite kind of podcast. Isn't the one that like planned out with all the questions. So like I don't pre-plan my. I know who I'm talking to, but I don't pre-plan the questions or anything. I think the best podcasts out there are the ones just a couple guys or gals shooting the shit, talking about something they're passionate about.
Well, and real. That's why we're here. So one of the things that gets me twitchy is you get on a podcast or you listen to a podcast and someone's like, oh yeah, hey, we were just talking about this in the green room. And it's like, fuck the green room. Like we don't have to do backstage stuff. Just press the button. So we occasionally have some behind the scenes stuff.
Steered.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Then it's like, oh well, let's make sure we hit these points. No, this is simple. Let's have a conversation. So I love recycling. I met a kid this weekend. I was in Charlotte. He's a fourth generation scrapper. He's 22, just ready to graduate college, wet behind the ears and excited. I talked to him for 3 hours while I watched an abysmal football game put on by the Green Bay Football Packers.
Man.
Yeah, let's not talk. That's it. That's the extent of football we're talking. Oh my God, Sunday coming up is Packers Cowboys. No big deal. 3:25 Central. Watch the Packers put a whooping. I'm gonna be up in my deer stand at that point. All right.
Hey, real quick, let's make a bet. Whoever loses wears the other team's jersey on the podcast.
Oh, bet done. Only because if I think about it too long, it's gonna hurt. All right.
Yes.
Let's get Brett involved here. All right. So I know a little bit about your background because we were at the expo. Let's talk about your background. Third generation scrap. Are you the owner yet, or
yes, sir.
In process? Okay, all right. Because I know sometimes they end up in trust or stick around. So let's talk. What was it like growing up in the scrap world? Inside the wire, if you will, every day.
Dude, I grew up in a small hometown scrapyard. We had one facility. My grandma worked the scale. My grandfather was in the back office. My dad worked outside. And eventually my mom worked the scale, just mom and pop shop, nothing too fancy, dirt yard. I spent my childhood watching Saturday cartoons at the scrapyard with my in my grandpa's office on a fucking old school TV. And then as I got a little bit older, I was able to kind of get involved and I started, counting the change out of the vending machines. And then I was able to actually start working the recycling center, basically buying aluminum cans, running aluminum cans from the general public. And then as I got a little bit older, I was actually able to run the cutting torch. And growing up in between that, I was able to, drive forklifts and with a 2-ton truck around the yard. And that's kind of how I learned to drive. And before I could ever have a driver's license. And then, once I got enough experience buying aluminum cans from the general public, I could buy everything under the sun, brass, copper, aluminum cans, you name it. And then run the cutting torch, a little bit bigger equipment.
What state are you out of?
I'm in Idaho.
Idaho. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, And then we had a little trucking company, you know, a couple trucks, little pipe company. We sold a little bit of pipe on the side, corrugated steel pipe. And then my grandfather retired in 1997, like my sophomore year in high school. We partnered with Schnitzer Steel. At that point, we had added a little feeder yard in a place called Mountain Home, Idaho, mostly known for its Air Force base. And then I left to go to school and played football in college, came back, got my business degree, and went to work. I'd always ask my dad, you know, when do I get to work in the office? And he basically said, as soon as you go to college. And so somebody in our family actually go to college. And that's the game. And so from then on, I brought a bunch of guys with me, some from college, some of just buddies I met throughout the years, and just built, you know, added locations, brought more people in. And then, you know, I think we got up to 8 yards, a couple auto salvages, and I retired my parents in 2016.
That's awesome. So you're where you said 8 yards now today?
Correct.
And how do these yards compare to that original yard you grew up on? Is that yard still active, or is that?
No, I moved my office to that original facility. So when we built the Boise facility in 2013, which is our big non-ferrous processing facility, I had moved to there and helped open that office up, that building up and facility. And then here a couple of years ago, right before COVID hit, the year that COVID really hit, which was 2020, actually 2020, we had revamped one of our trucking facilities, and we moved kind of, you know, my CFO, which is my really good friend, and myself into that building. We brought some more people in where our trucking dispatch is at, and kind of put myself back to Caldwell, back where I grew up, which is
okay
on multiple levels. I love it. That's where I want to be.
So a lot of our audience are junk removal companies. A lot of guys are starting up, you know, first generation entrepreneurs. Or, you know, I was fortunate. My great grandfather owned a scrapyard, and although that family business didn't survive after his death, it was always something in our blood, in our veins. I spent my weekends going to scrapyards and landfills with my dad because it's what we knew, and it's how we made an extra buck every now and then. And so, you know, did you being in the family business and going from, you know, counting change on the vending machine to, you know, being confident enough, or, you know, and confident and competent enough to buy, you know, non-ferrous metals, was the plan always to run the scrapyard? I mean, was there ever a time where you're like, hey, I'm gonna go get me a job, or was it always this is what I'm gonna do?
I always knew what I was gonna do. Since I've been like 2 years old, I was old enough to wipe my own ass. I knew what I was gonna do. I knew a portion of what I was gonna do. Right. I knew it. Yeah. I love the scrap business. I love the industry. I always knew there was some facet of it that I would be involved in, to a certain extent. So.
And then you said your dad retired in 2016. Is he out of the business? Does he still hang around? What does that look like now?
I mean, my dad grew up. He had a hard life, man. Him and my mom, they got married pretty early, like 18, 17 years old. And my grandfather worked his ass off, didn't pay him a lot of money. And he grew up in the business as well, right? I mean, cleaning wire in their garage on the driveway. Like that's what he did. So I don't even really want to go to college or whatever, which is fine. And he was happy doing what he's doing. And then, you know, in 97, when my grandfather was ready to retire, he didn't have any money to buy him out. I mean, most people know about, they hear the scrap business, think there's a lot of money to be made. And I think in certain aspects there can be. But back in those days, it was hard. I mean, it was a hard living. I mean, you worked your ass off to make
I feel like
$1.
Yeah. I feel like scrap is also in the same realm of waste. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of money to be made on the bigger scales, right? Like when you're one of these big top 3 companies that kind of own the market. I'm not sure what it's like up in the Northwest where you're at. But I remember I was stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington. So I lived up there for like 6 years. Okay. And I remember doing a project for someone's dad I tore a house down for them. It's my first demo. I was in the Army, and it had nothing to do with anything I'm doing now.
Yeah.
It was a mobile home.
Okay.
But I had to go take all this crap to the scrapyard. And I remember going out there and like doing the whole thing. And it was on the port right there in Tacoma area.
Yeah.
And I asked them, like, so where does all this go? Because it's just heaps and heaps of metal. Like, I was just in awe. And they're like, oh, it gets loaded up on ship and shipped out. Right? That's it. And I was like, okay. And then fast forward to now, I did a lot of recycling through CMC, commercial metals. They're a pretty big operation.
Public traded company.
I told Andy about this, I think, where I was taking my scrap across the highway. There was a steel distribution plant. And I asked the scrap guy, I was like, hey, do y'all talk to each other? Y'all work together? He's like, oh, no idea. No idea who they are or what they do. I'm like, really? He goes, no, we ship all our shit out. It gets bought up by overseas, and then it gets refined and shipped back to us. And then they probably buy it. And I was like, that's insane to me, right? Mm-hmm. The process of that. But like I said, they're a huge company, and they have plants everywhere. Yeah. And then you see the row down the street. You see that row of just smaller scrap yards where I can go here and get – I know here they won't check the tin as much. Or I know here they'll give me a better price on copper, or they'll actually pay me for screens. And
it's a way. It's an interesting. There's so many mom and pop scrap yards out there, and those are like the people I love talking to. I mean, when from 1997 until 2000 and end of 2015, we were partnered with Schnitzer Steel. I mean, they're a publicly traded company. They're a good size outfit, and it's a different world, the corporate scrap world versus the private.
How does that affect y'all as a smaller scrap yard?
Great. I mean, we learned. I mean, they helped us grow up. I look at it like we were kind of a teenager, company, and they kind of helped mature us into where we are today. They kind of helped us kind of get some, our commercial side of our business established. They helped us kind of understand the accounting process in a little bit better. They helped us do a lot of things. I look back on that relationship and think so much good came out of it. They helped us become who we are today. And so I look back on that and say that was a good deal at the time for us to partner with them. We wouldn't be where we're at today without them. But also we wouldn't be where we're at today if we didn't have that small business entrepreneurship mindset that, like when you talk about the first generation, trash haulers, waste haulers out there, like battling that. I mean, that's like a pure love and a pure hustle and grit that gets lost in like today's world of, I just want this job, cozy job, get paid as much as I can and not, do the least amount of work. Right. Versus, I live and die by the fact that there's so much opportunity in this world if you just are willing to go do it. I mean, and that's
the real secret right there. What you just said, that's the real secret. You just got to be willing to do the thing.
Yeah. It's not sexy. The shit that's not sexy is the best. I mean, to me, like I got my tire recycling shirt on. That's a hard doggy dog business. But man, the shit that's not sexy, that's a true waste stream or whatever, scrap. Yeah. Like that's the stuff I love the most because it's the grittiest, down to earth, real world people that you're ever gonna meet.
And create the creativity too, because it shows that this person's creative enough to not just hop on board to something that's already going. He's not reinventing the wheel. He's actually modifying the wheel in his own way. And real quick, Andy, the wood flag behind me. The reason I like this flag so much because a couple years ago, as you know, I was flipping lumber, right?
Yep.
I had a guy buy a bunch of lumber, and he made these flags, and he made this one for me with the lumber he bought from me that I repurposed or resold and stuff. That was just going to go to the landfill anyways.
Chip off the old block, Casey. Chip off the old block.
So it's pretty cool. But, the cool thing is with the scrap is, I was talking to someone at the conference we went to, and they're like, man, I never knew there were so many different options of just chunking your shit. I'm like, dude, there's so many different options. People think scrap metal is just Coke cans and a buggy, that guy hauling to the scrapyard. I was like, it's so much more than that, You'll be so surprised how much you can recycle just in the metal world, let alone the real world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just got to be willing to get your hands dirty a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the name. What was that name of the company that you partnered with for a while there, and how long were you in business together?
Schnitzer Steel.
How
We
long
were almost partnered for almost 20 years.
Okay,
Oh, wow.
so it reminded me. So I had a venture capitalist partner for about 2.5 years, and I saw, to your point, right? This is where I started with my parents' old Chevy van and a trailer, hauling junk and driving up the northwest side of Milwaukee, where all I was doing was hauling scrap. I was pulling bed frames and appliances, right? And I was either taking
Door frames.
taking stuff to the scrapyard. Yeah, I mean, taking it to the scrapyard, or there was a guy that bought appliances. Like those were my two. That was my whole business, right?
Yeah.
I know I got $25 in appliance. If it was decent, or I take it to the scrapyard, get $7, $8, $10 depending on what the ton. It was around $2.20 a ton at the time. So whatever, right? And that's how I cut my teeth doing that. But to your point, even for our listenership, recognize where you're at and don't be jealous of where other people are at, but what can you learn from them? Like you said, you spent 20 years with one of the big boys. I spent a couple of years with Waste Management. Once I saw the way that Waste Management looked at things and the way that how they evaluated how they spend their capital, and also the tools they had. I mean, Waste Management's got the greatest tools ever, right? Because they have the money for the software to figure out how to do routing and all this shit. It's like then in your business, like, yeah, you can't start off with a fucking Ferrari, but you can add things to the vehicle that is your business as you go, and recognize that there's some things that big businesses do really well. Like you said, financials, key performance indicators, tracking, they do phenomenal. In small business, I would argue, like I watched my old man, he didn't do a great job of it for 30 years running a business. Now he stayed in business, but he never scaled. He never got it. He never got out of. He's 67 years old. He's still in the truck, which that's where he wants to be.
But the real cool key takeaways is recognizing, even when you're in a bad deal or a good partnership or a bad partnership, is if you can take away the good from either one. Like I know you and I both have been in bad partnerships before, but if you can recognize any kind of positivity that you can take away and put towards the next step, then you're already on top. You're already ahead of other people. Great. 2.5 years is nothing compared to 20, but it was also what you learned along the way.
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, I think like when we got the opportunity to, buy them out, and they owned 50% of our company at the time, and they gave us the opportunity to buy them out. It was super imperative and super important for me to keep the relationship, right? So I kept the relationship. I still sell them a good jag of scrap every single month over month since 2016. Nothing changed on our front. And, you take the positive out of it and you say, all right, this is what we learned. This is what made us better. And I kept the relationship, and we still have a strong relationship to this day. And, it ended on good terms. The time was right, enabled me to, retire my parents, and at the same time enabled me to, give some of our key guys bigger roles within our company, which then allows you to scale because you're now bringing people up. I tell people all the time, like with a small business, the small business may be a ladder with one rung, but as you scale, you create more rungs on the ladder, which creates more opportunity for your people internally, and they can see that you're trying to grow. You're trying to build the ladder. Building the ladder creates positions. Building the ladder creates opportunities for individuals. They can see a future within your business, and that my dad giving me the ability to say, all right, like you want to grow. I can tell, like you're young. You want to conquer the fucking world at 22. Then, he basically gave me the coverage, the air cover, whatever you want to call it, to say, go do it. Like, go make it happen. He kind of had ran out of, maybe ran out of gas a little bit because he had been doing it for so long and under different circumstances where you are just trying to survive versus trying to thrive. Yeah. And it's a very different, mentality when you're just trying to keep the lights on versus when you got a little bit of wiggle room to take a few more chances. I owe a lot of that to him giving me the keys to the truck and saying, go figure it out. And, luckily,
I think it's also a generation thing too.
yeah.
Right? How old are you, Brett?
I am 41.
Okay, yeah. So we're all around the same age. I mean, I just turned 34, so I'm nothing compared to y'all's age. But we're
y'all's age, like we're old men, Brett. Like we're old men.
Oh man.
Okay,
I think the
I'm not
point is,
covering
I
up
think
salt
our
and pepper.
generation.
I got a nice head of hair. I ain't covering up the salt and pepper.
I just wear a hat
34.
all the time. But I got
Yeah,
hair.
exactly. Hold on.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
who's got the most salt? Who's got the most salt? Let's
Hey, man.
Is like I'm too fucking lazy
I know.
to comb my hair.
Oh, this is
There you go.
I don't
Hey.
ever comb my
Oh,
hair.
he's got gel in his
I
hair.
did
Look at
today.
this gel. He's
Yeah.
fucking. Oh my god, he's got gel in and a nice shirt.
I like.
Real quick, for
Nice shirt.
all the people, I can't even get my headphones on right. All right, for all the people that are listening only, that have never actually seen our face, Casey looks like 57-year-old
50.
dude. That's my like driving the truck
50.
the whole time. 50-year-old dude. He's got the salt and pepper. When I met him, before Casey got in the junk rule game, he had that fresh-eyed military look, the short hair, no beard, you know, like whatever. God,
Andy, I was looking at pictures from the McDonald's job, and when my beard was like this,
oh,
and
yeah,
I
he's a
told
nice
my
beard.
wife, I was like, I'm never doing that again. She's like, well, yeah, it was terrible.
Oh,
And I was like, why the hell would you let me have a beard like that?
Dude.
I look terrible. It was
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. You look,
I mean,
you know
was
what?
like this.
You look
I was pulling out
domesticated now.
bolts,
Yeah.
when we were recycling shit. But I mean, my point is, I think the generations before is I learned a lot from the people around me that were my dad's age, right? The dads and mom's age, because they were taught differently to reach success. So when they were doing things, you watched them, we watched them put everything into something, and we felt like, man, why are they not happy? Or why are they, 30 years later, they're still like killing themselves for something. And then we realize, okay, well, we can take a little bit of the negative from their path and make it a positive for ours. But like the one thing for me with the scrap, I want to ask you, how many of your customers or partners are in the junk removal space, specifically not like bigger scrap companies, but like, hey, how many junk removal guys are coming in and recycling with you?
We do a lot of business with junk removal guys, from Junk King to your local 208 trash hauler guys to junk haulers. I was trying to think. I mean, there's a grip of them down here. One of the guys I hired initially that runs our converter recycling company, he actually started it was Southern Idaho, Southeast Idaho junk hauler business on the side while he was working with us. He built it up and then just sold it here recently. And I said, yeah, man, I mean, on the sides for even like a side hustle while I'm still, we're still working with us full time. By all means, man, like make it happen. And he did, and he did well. Well enough to the point that I kind of looked at almost buying that company. And, but then I kind of just, started, looking at it and saying, well, a lot of our customers are bringing us material. And then now I'm kind of creating some friction with my customer base. So I just kind of like backed away a little bit. And he found another willing,
Well, plus you're an in-state, right?
Yeah. I just didn't, it just made sense. But so I'm fairly in tune with what that business looks like, what that industry looks like. Not as much as you guys are, obviously, but I got a rough idea how it works.
So you're familiar with norm then, right? What norm is?
As far as
naturally occurring radiation material.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, radiation.
Oh my god.
At every single one of our scales. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. I'm glad you are.
All right. So Casey calls me one day. He's like, because I'm his go-to scrap guy, right? Because I grew up around him. But I had a choice back in 16. I got back from a deployment to Gitmo, and my two choices. There's a scrap yard that I grew up going to as a kid, Ruby's yard here in Milwaukee, which the guy from Alter knows him. Who's the guy from Alter? Not John. Who's the big guy from Alter that was at this scrap expo?
Jay Benedict's.
Jay, all right, yeah. He knew Ruby. Ruby's an old scrap dealer here in Milwaukee. Yeah. I had a chance to buy his yard or start my junk rule business. The startup cost to junk removal was about $100,000 all in. While running a scrap yard was significantly more. right? I mean, he had trucks, he had cans, he had the yard, scale house, everything. So I really wanted to get into that business anyway. So Casey calls me a couple of years ago, and he's like, hey, what do you know about radiation? I was like, stay away from it. He's like, what do you about Norm? I was like, I don't know. From like fucking Cheers? I don't know what fucking Norm is. And he's like, you're taking a scrapyard, or you're taking a load of the scrapyard where buzzards start going off. And I was like, yeah, no, we don't. The appliances I pick up are normally pretty good. They're,
man.
So he well, I don't know, you tell the story.
We did a really big project. It was a demolition of horse stables and fences and you name it, little barns. And I had really good connections with our scrap company. So I was like, bring out the 40s. We're going to fill them bitches up heavy. Because I was like, look, this is all pole. It's all pole fencing. This thing's going to weigh so much. You're going to get paid. I'm going to get paid. We're all going to have happy endings here. Until I got the phone call like, dude, this whole scrapyard just lit up. Everything shut down. Like alarms going off, lights going off. And I'm like, okay, well, that sucks. What happened? Well, your it's hot. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, it's radioactive. I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, this is a horse stable. Come to find out, it's all drilling pipe that they use for.
I was going to say drill pipes they repurpose to make stables.
Golly. Yeah. So everybody listen out there, just to let you know, prepare yourselves because it will happen. And I immediately was just like, I thought the scrapyard was trying to pull one over on me, so I'd have to pay for the dumpsters. And I'm like, this isn't right. So I call Andy. I'm like, Andy, hey. And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, what the fuck are you? Like, are you kidding me?
I know. Well, no. Well, so I work for Waste Management. We had radiation detectors at Waste. I know they have radiation detectors at the scrapyard, but I thought it was just some like EPA thing you had to have.
Yeah,
and it never actually goes off. Right? Like I'm thinking, if someone comes in with nuclear waste, right, in a black trash bag, they'll figure it out.
And it was a big deal. Like, I didn't know how big of a deal it is until I'm like scrambling over the course of like 4 days because now the job stopped, right? Because this was mostly metal. And all these dumpsters are just full. And I'm like, man, I did not budget for that. So I'm like I called Austin at the Capital Text. I'm trying to talk to the state. The lady on the phone's like, yeah, I don't know. Where you take that? I was like, they gave me your number. So she gives me a number. I call them. It's the same people that gave me her number. So then finally I was like talking to the scrap guy. I was like, hey, so how do we do this? Like, how do we make this all go away? And he's like,
take it backwards.
And this is a smaller guy, right?
Yeah.
It was a smaller company. And he's like, if you pay me $500 a can, we'll take care of it. And I was like, deal. Let's do that now. It never happened. I'll lose a little bit of money on the job, but we just won't discuss this anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. But it was the scariest thing because you think radioactive. Now my guys are freaking out. Like, am I going to die? Am I going to be melting inside? And I'm like, I don't know. I can't tell you that. I have no clue.
50-50.
Yeah. Altman for one. He was the one that was very paranoid. You know Altman.
Altman's also the same guy he's also the same guy that's to check his baggage when he goes to the airport. He carries about 9 knives on him at all times.
Yeah. Like, at all times.
At all times. He's got one around his neck, waist, hip, shoe, hat.
But he literally was like, look, I might go get checked out just because I don't know how much radiation I have. I'm like, oh, man, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But you know what? I can't tell you it's not. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, how's that conversation with your doctor go? Like, hey, I might have radiation poisoning. And they're like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
not sure.
On you? Like,
all I know is I was around a bunch of horse stables.
Yeah.
So yeah, Norm's real, but have you ever had any experience with that?
Oh yeah. I mean, we've slowly had to install radiation detectors at every one of
Geiger counters,
our facilities,
right?
just because for that reason we have to be prepared because stuff comes in, and if we send a hot load to a steel mill or the shredder, they'll reject the load, which that's depends on which direction we're going. That's a 200 to 400 mile freight for us. Like we have to take a hard look at. We get it down there. Now we got to bring it back. Now we got to take go through the load, figure out what's hot, what's not, and resort it. So we're better to try and catch it on the front end, coming in and going out. So we bring them through coming in, the customers. We bring our own trucks through on the way out just to make sure that we're not going to have any issues delivering to the steel mill or delivering to the shredders. So yeah, it's a real thing. It's a rarity. You don't see it very often. Most of the time, it's a
once is enough for me.
Yeah, it's a norm issue. Like it just looks like dirt in the bottom of a pipe. It's just the way that dirt's constructed, And a lot of times it's repurposed pipe, stuff that, came from old drill stem or whatever that got into some pretty, some rough sediment or whatever. And, but, we ran across it a few times for sure.
So you just reject it and say, hey, look, you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
You don't have really any more
steps
after that. Because the reason I asked is because the scrap guy was like, and even CMC, I even called the big guy. I was like, hey, John, you're a huge company. I know you'll run into this. And he's like, yeah, man, all the time. Yeah, that's bad stuff. You shouldn't turn that in.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I turned it in. And he's like, oh, well, why'd you do that? I was like, because I don't have a fucking Geiger counter on my truck, man. Like, how do I know? Like, So then I'm like, so how do I get rid of it? He goes, oh yeah, I don't know about that. I'm like, well, he's like, I just know when you go off, we reject it. That's all I know. I'm like, so you don't know how to get rid of it.
That's a good process. It's a great process. Hey,
so I was like, shit. So I have all this radioactive material. Apparently in my head, I'm thinking like, this is going to be a movie one day. The whole town's shut down kind of thing. Because all out here is radiation. I'm like Chernobyl all over again, but in Colleyville, Texas. And I'm like, this is not cool. How do I get rid of this? And no one had that answer except for this one guy. I'm not gonna say names because he did me a solid, but I don't know how he got rid of it.
Never hurts to know the guy,
Yes.
Yep.
Well, that's the other thing in this industry, in the junk removal industry. On the more positive note, right? I was giving a tour a couple of days ago, and I was talking about mattress recycling, different types of recycling we do here, and you can find a scrapyard in Google, but a lot of the other people that we know that take care of problems for us or recycle things, right? It's just a guy. You don't find them in Google. You just got to be in the hustle every now and then. You run into people at the transfer station, landfills, scrapyard. There was this guy I used to pick up at the scrapyard called, his name was Tyrone. Tyrone had the cart, lived nearby, but I used to pick him up occasionally when I had bigger jobs on the side of the road that I needed help with. And Tyrone was my guy. One of my favorite stories about Tyrone at the scrapyard. I picked him up to go pick up some refrigerators I needed a hand with because I had to get him out of a basement.
Yeah.
So he helps me. And then later that day, he's like, hey, I know where they have an airplane engine. And I was like, crackhead Tyrone, you don't know a fucking airplane engine. He's like, no, dude. He goes, I know where there's an airplane engine. I'm like, all right, let's go. So we drive like 4 or 5 blocks, not far. Go around the backside of this building, gates open. So I'm like, fuck it. I was going to tell him I was turning around. No shit, there it is. Airplane engine on a pallet. It's like 5-foot radius. I don't know, 2,000 pounds, no idea. He's like, how do you think we can get this in your van? And I was like, we can't. That's how we get in the van. I had my trailer with me. He's like, you think we can get that? I'm like, absolutely not. You think I can walk in the scrapyard with an airplane engine and they're not going to say anything? Be like, oh yeah, we'll just take that. Yeah. So there you go. So between Casey's guy and my guy Tyrone in the junk removal world, it's good to have a guy. But do the minimum vetting. All I'm saying is do the minimum vetting possible, and then occasionally you got to tell people lose your number. Like don't ever call me again.
As a society, everybody's like, hey, always ask questions. There's sometimes you don't fucking ask questions. Like I'm gonna tell you right now, when he gave me that option, he gave me an out. He was like $500 a can makes this all go away. I said, yes, sir. I'm gonna send you that money right now. I don't care about anything else. I don't want to be in the news. Not that way, at least.
Understandable. Like I said, I mean, if you're trying to handle it the right way, I think that's the best. I think that's the best goal. You alerted the people in your area. Hey, this is what I got. They didn't know what to do with it. I mean, ultimately, you got to.
Even the state level didn't.
That's what I'm saying.
Even the state was like, "Yeah, I don't know how to do that." Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Fuck that. All right. So, hey, as you see, let's go back to junk removal with respect to our audience. What are some things that you're seeing, missed opportunities that the junk removal guys are coming in with? When you're seeing them dump loads or, what are they doing? Are they sorting ferrous, non-ferrous?
Yeah, I mean,
are they separating wire by type?
I think on our end, the guys we see they're pretty knowledgeable, man. Like, I mean, I think that there's some, they know that there's revenue there. And I mean, they're good at sorting their material, which is good. I as a scrap metal recycling company, I like dealing with junk removal guys because they bring their material in. For the most part, they know what they got, which is good.
And they help y'all out, right? That helps y'all more.
I mean, it helps us. I mean, on the unload process, we put them, towards the tin, the shreddable pile. Like they know what goes in there. The biggest thing I would make sure with your junk removal guys is they're not trying to put too much garbage in the scrap, right? Like take the garbage where it needs to go. mean, because that's how you're going to get the best price out of your local scrap guy. If you say, hey, they know when you roll in, you're not trying to stuff them full of shit. You're like, you roll in with good material, and you're not like trying to offload some fucking dresser drawers as scrap because it's got one piece of iron on it. Like, no, like, you know what I mean? You guys.
My favorite was fence post.
I mean, ultimately,
metal fence post with that big dingleberry of concrete.
100%. And I gotta be chiming. I see it all the time. And like,
very bottom.
Please believe, like, and know this to be true, that you try and fuck the scrap guy, you're going to get him once or twice. I promise you he'll get you. So don't. I mean,
he'll get you back
for your audience.
And then do you talk to others? Okay. Do you? So if you got someone that's bringing you some bullshit, you turn them away. Do you let the other scrap yards know in the area?
Do you guys talk to each other, right? Maybe
a little bit.
We don't. Not that.
No,
much.
I would say local. That's one thing that's interesting is a lot of local junk removal guys don't really talk to each other. I went to a conference and this one guy's like, he knows where my building is, a gas station 3 blocks away. He's like, hey man, I've been wanting to come into your building. I know who you are. I want to visit you. I'm like, hey man, door's open. Come by anytime. And he hasn't taken me up on it. That was 2 months ago. So a lot of junk removal guys don't want to share their secrets. And that's one of the reasons why Casey and I have the podcast. I know there's people here in Milwaukee listening to me. There's no secrets. This is how I run my business.
I mean, really, what secrets
and that's
are
the thing.
you
I think
giving
it's
them?
more
Like,
of a. They're afraid they're going to steal their business.
What are you
somehow.
really giving them for secrets?
Yeah, I mean,
there's
no secrets.
Right.
Work hard. Take care of your customer. Get some Google reviews. You know, I mean, there's not. I'll just put it out there right now. I would argue. I guess you can tell me if I'm wrong, right? And it's be consistent with your customers. Be consistent with your vendors. Right. And when you do that, you're going to win more times than not.
Well, I've had scrap yards refer me to other yards that pay better on a certain thing.
Yeah.
Like they say, hey, if you go down to H&H or whatever, they're actually paying about 30 cents more.
Yeah. What? Help me understand that, Brett. Why is it? And is it really that simple? Like I take my data wire, the only data wire to one scrap yard, and they take all types, but versus, I mean, it's like 4 or 5x what I get at my regular scrap yard. I get 70, 80 cents a pound data wire versus like 12 to 15 at another scrap yard. What are the triggers? Why is it some scrap yards are better on certain?
We got better homes for the final material, or like if you're taking it to the 1 yard and they got, like, say, a wire chopping line. Like if they're chopping that wire, they know the recovery and they're buying it based on like data cable, for example. That's 50% copper. Most people are like, okay, 50%. You know, any of your Cat 5, like most of your junk haulers probably don't know that, but you're 50% copper by recovery. Okay, so and you can chop it into a number one chop. So if your local guy is buying it for 12 or 15, then he's probably putting it into his computer wire pile and just selling it off and calling it is what it is, right? But if you're going to a real wire chopping facility or a bigger scrapyard that understands recoveries, if he's paying you 70, 80, that puts your Comex. Let's say the Comex is $3, right? You have some cost of processing, some cost in the cash outlay, plus your discount off Comex for your sale and some shipping. I mean, 70, 80 cents is an okay price, depending on volume, depending on pricing. Depends if you clip the ends, if you clip the outlets, everything that goes along with it. But a lot of it comes back down to like your original question, the original like minute or two ago, we're talking about quality material. You bring me in quality material, you're not trying to pull one over on me, trying to make a fast buck. You figure out who those customers are, and you're going to take care of them because you want them to come back and you want them to keep bringing you that material. The 12 to 15 cent guy, he either doesn't know the recovery, or B, he just wants to put it in this computer pile, make 20 cents on it and be done with it, right? Like the wire chop guy, he knows if he can get you to keep coming back with all your Cat 5, Cat 6 wire, like that's a good choppable material if you have a wire chopping line, and you can upgrade the shit out of that material.
I never knew this, but it makes sense now that you explained it. They're just better equipped for that material.
For that one, so that particular yard that gives us best price, it's a non-ferrous only yard, and they have a wire chopper there, and they're in an industrial park, right? So what's interesting is my number what I call number 1 copper wire, which basically Romex for all intents and purposes, and then number 2 copper wire, which is power cords and extension cords and things like that. Right, my scrapyard gives me a better price because that's what they deal in more than the guy that does his own, or not. He's not a guy. It's West Alice Salvage here. They'll give me the similar pricing for that as a scrapyard. And I normally, so I Gaylord everything. That's the extent of where I get it to. If I get it on a Gaylord, the only thing I'll not when you say process, aluminum gutters I'll bale just because it's not. I mean, like 3 or 4 Gaylords of aluminum gutters is a waste of time to fucking even put on my truck and drive down. Yeah. It's a waste of space. So I'll bale aluminum gutter. But other than that, everything else just get Gaylorded. And then I got 240s in my yards. I flip those sheet iron, tin, whatever. We all shreddable iron. We flip those once a week, a little bit more frequent than that.
I think to give value,
that's my operation. A lot of
give
guys
value to your audience. From my end is know what you have. The better you can segregate it, the better. I mean, listen to the scrapyard. Listen to what they have to help. Ask them to help you sort the material initially, so that when you come back, you've got it better sorted for them, and you can basically make it less operationally intensive for them to buy your material.
Yep.
Right, and then you're going to get a better price, depending on your sort, and then know your wire recoveries, because if you're selling, say, Romex, the difference between, say, a true house wire, white or yellow, versus, like, say, an orange Romex that's the stouter single strand. I mean, you're talking about a 7 to 8% recovery difference. You're talking like 72 versus, say, 65. So, I mean, there's a decent value spread in there. So, depending on how far you're sorting it and who's your buyer, I mean, the best thing you can do from a value standpoint is be educated, like, on your material. So you show up.
Yeah, I've never had a scrapyard not help me. Help them.
Yeah,
like they've always been very open to, hey man, look, try it this way. I've even called them from a job site, and they've said, hey, look, if you can do it this way without wasting too much time, then you get way more money if you do it this way. Otherwise, just do it this way. And they actually do want to help you.
Yeah, well, and
recycle
because it takes sort time off of them as well. Like if it comes in and the shit's organized, all your old sheet aluminum with gutters, gutters can go as painted siding. They just, and then you keep your old sheet separate versus your painted siding or whatever, and you just make it. The easier you make it on them, I promise you, the better they're going to pay you.
Yeah, because you guys are. I mean, otherwise you're going to end up sorting it. And do you make money when you end up having to go in the tin pile and sort through shit, or is that just it's kind of like
there's some stuff that's worth pulling out, but for the most part, like it's going in the tin pile for a reason. I think that's. There's a reason why it's there.
What about Christmas lights?
All like together. God. Christmas lights, people like Christmas lights with Christmas lights. Don't mix Christmas lights with your Cat 5, Cat 6 wire, or stuff like that, or your extension cords. Because Christmas lights is its own package. It's sold as its own package because it's such a shit item. It's hard to process. So... Yeah,
it is.
So wait,
we got a shit ton down here.
So what about
garbage.
Coax cable?
It's the coax cable is basically a steel stranded, copper coated garbage wire that.
It's a bunch of plastic.
Yeah. So the recommendation I give, and this is the way we do it, and our scrapyards are good with it. I put Christmas lights and coax cable in with my shreddable steel, and they're fine with that. Like. That's my simplest. Yeah. Like if I had a scrapyard get shitty with him one time, they're like, we don't want it. So for the longest time, we would separate it. And finally, one of my scrapyards is like, dude, just dump it in with it. Like, it'll sort itself out. Like we can't tell you how much we don't care. Like it's a pain in the ass, but we don't care.
If you get enough Christmas lights, it's still, I think, in your favor to make it a Gaylord of just Christmas lights.
Sort.
I would. I mean.
Well, that's what we ended up doing because
I would test drive that.
Full Gaylord, they'll take it as a full Gaylord. I just didn't understand the pricing because they were just kind of like, look, man, we don't really do this much. But if it's just all based on a huge glob of Christmas lights,
they're going to most yards, not all yards, but most yards will sell that as a separate product. I know I do.
Yeah, I mean, in my head, it's like, it might take me a year to fill up a Gaylord of Christmas lights. Is it worth it? But then I also think about how many fucking Christmas lights I might be able to fill up one in a month. You know, just you know, it comes on a like I've worked myself into a position where I have 20,000 square feet of warehouse. Now, the problem when you have a big warehouse is you justify storing shit that you don't that you should be storing.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, it's like you're creating a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. You know, because right now, what do you pay on? Hold on, what do you pay on Christmas lights right now? If I pull up your scale house right now, I got 100 pounds of Christmas lights. What do you pay on Christmas lights versus shred?
I mean, it's not that much of a difference. Like it will be a big difference as the price of scrap keeps coming down. It's down again, you know, sideways to down this month. Yeah. You're probably looking at another down market in December. Yeah. So the gap will start to widen where, like, if you're paying a dime for Christmas lights or 12 cents or whatever, compared to, let's say, 5 cents for steel, you know, or shreddable shit, you know, like what you guys are probably dumping off in the shreddable pile or roll off.
Yeah. So it make more sense to have way more than just a couple.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, like, what's your, you know, are you trying to squeeze every dime, or are you like, do you have the space to sort it off? There's so many different ways to skin the cat. I just was saying, just be educated on how your scrapyard recycling company likes to receive material. And if you've got a good one, you have good rapport, ask them those questions and say, what's the best way for me to get the best price? And I can sort accordingly. Yeah. And because your goal is to be a good customer, just like their goal is to be a good consumer, and establish that out the gate. Say, how would you like to receive it? Because I am coming across whatever XYZ material on a regular basis, and I want to get the most money for it that I can. And how would you like to see it?
No, I love these today because I've said that on the podcast before. That's the way I've always believed it. And a lot of what we're talking about today is re-solidifying things that I thought I knew, right? But it's always good to touch bases. And what I've realized through the years, like the scrap dealer here in Milwaukee that I was close with, Art Arnstein, for years. I interviewed him when I was putting together a college paper. I mean, he's like my uncle. Now he got himself caught up in some shit, and he's no longer in the scrap business. But like 20 years, he taught me, and I thought, like I told Casey this, like I thought it was maybe just because, you know, my father knew him for years, and I kind of grew up in the business with my dad hauling loads, and on that end, not certainly not on the scale house end, but I've also seen it. Like what you're saying is it's exactly what I've always thought. If you go in there with an open mind and you have the conversation, scrapyards will take care of you. Because they right, it all comes down to work versus reward. Someone's going to put the work in, or someone's going to have the machine that does the work, and then they seek the reward. If you got time. I cut my teeth in 2009 when the economy took a shit. And I got laid off. 6 months, I didn't have a job. All I did is drive up and down, and I learned how to scrap to eat, and that was a hell of a learning experience. And I'm sitting there. I said I went from 5-gallon buckets to bins to garbage cans to Gaylords. Right, that was a 10-year process. It wasn't like I just showed up one day and had 20,000 square foot warehouse and all the knowledge in the world. You got to start. I mean, even before 5-gallon bucket, I remember having 1-gallon pails, the old ice cream pails, and my dad would have lock sets in there. The old ones that have the, you know, they're like the flat ones, and they got like 3 or 4 flat. What do you call it? 3 or 4 flathead screws take out, and then you get like 3 or 4 little pieces of brass on them. I mean, it takes 3 or 4 lock sets to get a pound of brass, but you know, when you're 7 years old, $10 is $10. You know.
And I find that honestly, most businesses, if you ask questions, they're going to help you. They're not just scrapyards, but just in general. And like I think in this industry, like you said, junk haulers don't like to talk to each other. It's honestly because they never have. They don't know how to approach the other person without encroaching on their field. Right? Hey, I'm not trying to take your business, but at the same time, I'm hungry for business just as you. And I think once you start realizing, like you go down Scrap Row in Fort Worth, Texas, it's a long street. There's probably 15, 20 different scrap yards all next to each other. Right. And they're always busy, all of them. And I guarantee they all know each other.
Yeah.
Right.
They might not like each other, but they know each other.
You go down there and right. They know each other.
Hey, I'd rather know my enemy than not, right? I mean,
yes.
But
you also don't set up shop next to them, and you don't set up shop next to them thinking, oh, you're going to run the market, right? But at the same time, you go in there and you ask them, and they'll always tell you their feedback based on their operations. If you're going to keep using them, how they prefer to have the material brought to them, and pick up the phone, ask your scrapyard before you drive all the way there with a whole load of shit. Just say, hey, man, I have this, and this. What should I do with it? How do you want it? What's the best way I can make my best return on it?
I like it. Yeah.
And they're going to help you.
Hey, how do you feel, Brett, when someone calls you and asks for a nickel up or a dime up on pricing? What are your thoughts there?
This is my last one. I'm going to get going, but I have an appreciation for the ask. If there's room, I'm willing to consider it. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, if it's somebody that is always asking, if it's an ask every single time, then that's coming, so you price it low. If they don't ever ask and they they just need some help on an item, then you give them the help if they're a good customer. But if you ask every single time, it's your prerogative. You have the. I mean, if you don't ask, you don't ever know. But if you're the guy that asks every time, then people know that's coming. So they're going to start you low, knowing that you're going to ask, and knowing that they're going to get you to the price where you should be anyways. So ask if you need the help. If you're at a point where you could use an extra dime, hey, ask the question. There's no harm in asking the question. And they might just tell you, hey, man, this is where I'm at. This is a good price. I've given you a good price. So take it or leave it. But most people, if you're in a bind or in a tight spot, they're willing to help you and kind of keep the train, keep some fuel in your truck and keep going. But if you're the guy that asks every time, expect your price to be low because they know they're going to have to move it up to where it should be because you're going to ask for it.
Mm-hmm. No, I do appreciate that. And with respect to Tom, I do appreciate you hopping on today, talking scrap, pulling, giving us some perspective. And the one takeaway I have here is ask, right? Ask questions, be curious about your industry, become an expert in your craft, and figure out who the players are upstream and downstream from you so that you can be the best steward, right? Be the best steward to the environment, be the best steward to your business.
One last thing,
Brett,
one last thing on that point, Andy.
Real quick.
I just want to make this point, and it's across your industry, mine, is you guys as haulers bust your ass to take care of your customers, right? That's how you grow your business. At the same time, I implore this to people, do the same thing to take care of your consumers, whether it's your landfill or your scrap guy or the guy. I mean, people don't put enough time, effort, and energy, and this is why I post the stuff I do on LinkedIn. And I call out the good players that I'm selling material to because those guys are consuming my material. They're good consumers. So make sure you spend as much time, effort, and energy on the consumption side as you do on the customer side, because that's what's going to build those relationships strong. And that's important. You want a good reputation when you roll into the scrapyard or you roll into the landfill or you roll into your secondhand store, or wherever you guys' outlet for your material is. You want them to be excited to see you because you're taking care of them. Just like your customer, you want your customer to be excited to see you because they know you're coming there to do a job for them and help them out. That knife always cuts both ways. So I'm always if I could leave on any advice, just be conscientious of the consumer as well as the customer.
No, that's it. I normally go around the horn and say, hey, what's your takeaways? That's it. Right, upstream, downstream, take care of everybody, and I like that. Right, as you're saying this, I'm thinking about my scrap dealer. I don't go out of my way to talk to him unless I got a load, and that's a very transactional relationship, and I got to transcend that so that you're right. It's just being a good steward to the industry, to the community, and also over time it'll positively impact your bottom line because it'll look to me as, hey, this guy helps feed my business. I want that business to flow.
While I'm fucking here. So your scrap guy will flip you jobs. Your scrap guy will flip you jobs that he can't do and he has no desire to do. If you build that rapport with them, I have so many guys that this is what they do, and I just say, hey, I got this call. I don't have the people. I don't have the bandwidth. It's too small of a job for me to mobilize. here. So that's
Deal with it. And just
What's your last name, Brett?
And bring me the tonnage. Yeah, bring me the tonnage.
it's Ekart, E-K.
What's your last name, Brett?
All right.
Cool.
All right, so you can find Brett on LinkedIn. He's got a great podcast, A Scrap Life. If you want to learn more about scrap, get onto his podcast. Follow him on LinkedIn. I can attest to this. He does put up things. He puts himself out there. I do appreciate that, and he challenges all of us here, not just in the recycling world, but in the business world, to think differently. Think about how your business impacts all the different facets of life. So I appreciate you. On behalf of Casey, Bubba Lawrence, and Brett, this has been episode 36 of the Trash Talk
fellas.
Business Podcast. We'll see you next week.